This is going, and let's bring in our panel. We're joined here in the studio by the Labor MP for Jagga Jagga in Melbourne, Keith Thwaites. Very good evening to you. And Keith Wolahan, the Liberal member for Menzies. Appreciate you both joining us tonight. And you hold, Keith, one of the very few Liberal seats, federal seats in metropolitan Melbourne. I think it's 3 that the Liberals currently hold. Do you feel like you're going to be one of only 2 Melbourne Liberal MPs?
It's not looking good, David. I think an important principle in any election and any democracy is that every vote gets counted within a reasonable statistical range. I remember on election night I went to bed 45 votes ahead, and then the postals broke 60-40 and it changed things. The turnout is very low here, and I'm not sure how that plays out in the importance of...
Well, let me put that to you because, yes, we were hearing that turnout was low, and both Labor and Liberal camps were telling me that that typically and historically favours the Liberal Party. So what's happened here?
I think we need to find out, because a lot of things that were typical are not typical anymore. When you look at previous decades back, the inner city and metropolitan areas voted right of centre. Higher education people voted right of centre. That's flipped, not just in our democracy but others, and I think we need to consider how that plays out for the turnout.
So what's gone wrong for the Liberal Party? Is the Liberal brand in Victoria toxic?
It's not good. I wouldn't use the word toxic.
And what word would you use?
I think, I don't know. I'm lost for words, to be honest. We're a city of 5 million people, and if we lose Aston tonight, to have 2 federal Liberal seats in a city of 5 million people, that will in the next decade be Australia's largest. That's not just bad for my party, that's bad for our democracy. And then on a state level, to have in a quarter of a century, 1 term of a Liberal government, anyone who's watching this that takes joy in that, I'd say, what does that mean for us as a democracy? And I think we need help as a party, and we need more people in our party.
That's a reasonable point, and Kate, we will come to you in just a moment. But from what you're seeing, this disastrous result for the Liberals, you're lost for words, as you say. Can we cut to the chase and ask you about Peter Dutton? How much responsibility does he bear for what we're witnessing?
Well, we all are responsible. I'm responsible. I'm a metropolitan member, so...
But he's your leader.
Yeah, but I've got to know him and know that he is a good leader. He really is. He's a good leader and he's a good person.
He might be a good leader in your view, but is he not resonating with voters?
Well, we need to consider that, but it takes a while to hear the message that's come from an election. We're still counting votes. I'm not conceding Aston tonight, and I think it may be a few days before we really know.
Here in Victoria, they've spent 2 weeks tearing themselves apart about whether one of their members should have appeared alongside
Interesting point you make. I do think that's an interesting point, the no-alition that we keep hearing from Anthony Albanese. Keith, do you think that the Liberal Party looks like it's been too negative? Do you think that's worth looking at again?
It may look that way, but in my experience, most of the time we're constructively supporting legislation that comes before the Parliament.
But that's not... No, these are key pieces. 2 pieces of climate legislation. Yeah. The Reconstruction Fund, the Housing Fund, it goes on. You've dealt yourselves out of the Senate negotiations.
National anti-corruption legislation, we constructively supported that.
But just talking about these key pieces of legislation just in the last week that you've obstructed or not participated in doing any deals to make the legislation better, do you think that's been the wrong strategy?
No, I don't think so, because I think that they're bad legislation, and that this... whatever's happened tonight, and we don't know what's happened tonight, we have a good idea. I don't think that suddenly means our analysis of a particular bill is flawed. And we looked at those carefully and had careful party room deliberations on those, and they're flawed legislation, and this doesn't change that. Whether that messaging was made clear or not, well, that's something we'll have to look at.
Keith, as we are digesting this historic news, Anthony Green has called the Aston by-election for the Labor Party. What does the Liberal Party need to do to heed the messages of this election? I mean, it seems to me like you have a deeper brand issue. What do you think you need to do going forward?
We need to do everything.
You can't just be going negative in campaigns.
No.
Fundamentally,
I
in terms
agree.
of policy and connection with voters, what do you need to do? We
need to do everything. And can I give a plea to my own party and my own party members? The first thing we need to do is to come together. I think when we fight and it spills over into the media, to think that Victorians don't notice that is just ridiculous. And when we're fighting with ourselves, that they know that we're not caring about them and we're not listening to them. So
is that your message to the state Liberals?
To all of us. And I'm a member of both. We're a federated party. So as Victorian Liberals, we've had a lot of tough nights, you know, from the federal election, the state election and tonight. And many will question, you know, is there a future? They will seriously question that. And what does that mean for our democracy? These are important questions.
What else do you say to your party on policy? Have you become hostage to the LNP branch in Queensland in your federal party room?
I don't think so, no. I formed, it was broken on insiders that we formed this Metropolitan Members Group, and it's about talking about how, as a party, we can better listen and react to Metropolitan seats. I've invited Metropolitan members, and if the results are as they seem tonight, that will be one less, I'd actually now like to invite the whole party room to that. Because if you're in a country seat, if you're in a regional seat, and you aspire for the Liberal Party to be in government, it doesn't happen.
You're not getting back into government without these metropolitan
Absolutely.
seats.
So this is now a task, not just on those from metropolitan seats, but all of us.
Can I just get in? Sorry, there's a question I really want to ask you. One of the big dilemmas for your political party will be forming a view on the voice to Parliament to be enshrined in the Constitution. If you look at the public polling and certainly the view in Victoria, and you're a Victorian MP, this is a by-election in Victoria, there is sympathy to this proposal. How do you go forward? Does the party need to support at least a free vote to allow people to campaign for a yes vote? Should you reconsider the negativity that the party has approached the voice debate with?
I come from a party that is driven by values and principles over power. And yes, tonight is a tough night, but we should always be guided by our values and principles. And I'm on the Voice Joint Standing Committee, so I will have a front row seat in what really will be a constitutional convention, because we didn't have one and we should have had one. There are serious concerns about the constitutional risk to the wording as designed, and I think we wouldn't be standing for principles if we don't seriously question that risk. Now, in the end, Victorians and Australians will all get the same vote as me. We all get one vote, and that's an important principle too. So I don't read party political results into how Australians will vote in a referendum where we all get the same.
Notwithstanding those concerns, and I understand you're likely to be elected as the deputy chair of this committee.
Well, we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. Do you accept that the signals the Liberals are sending on the Voice is costing them in a state like Victoria?
No, there was been no signals that the approach, which has been a correct one, is to ask for detail.
It's been a very negative approach. I don't think anyone could contest that. It's been negative. You haven't heard a lot of positive sentiments about the Voice from Liberal Party figures. Because
the detail really matters. This is our constitution, and I spoke about our democracy.
But do you think that negativity is affecting your vote? That there is a perception that you may contest, but a perception that your political party is not modernising, is not moving with the country?
There's always a risk of a perception, but I think our first duty is to stand to our principles. And the most important structure for our democracy is our constitution. It's so vital, and it's a beautiful document that's not flowery and doesn't, you know, it won't be in a musical or anything like that, but it has stood this democracy, one of the world's oldest democracies, well. So to be conservative about that is to defer to our democracy and the Australian people.
Let's go back to Anthony Green with another update on the very latest counts. Anthony.
It is a terrible night for Peter Dutton, isn't it? You've heard Anthony Green, who we respect and is a national treasure, just call the Aston by-election for Labor.
That is, and with all due respect to Anthony, I still want to see at least how those postal votes break, as well as the pre-polls. That there was a lot of them, and I think they deserve to be counted at least in substantial number.
Are you hoping for a miracle, though, to be honest?
Of course I am. Can I tell you why? Leave my party and Peter out of it. Rashina is an outstanding candidate, and we hear on so many times after elections that we need more people like Rashina. So to have put her up, and she did everything right. Everything a candidate should do, she did, and then some. Yeah,
interesting you say that, and she's certainly very accomplished. But is parachuting somebody from outside of the electorate part of the issue here? You know, we kept hearing throughout the campaign she lives in Brunswick, the trendy suburb of Brunswick. It's a far cry from anyone who's been to this seat of Aston knows. It's a very different kind of place. Was that part of the issue?
Well, that was certainly part of Labor's negative campaign, because Mary Doyle doesn't live in the seat either.
She lives in the eastern suburbs.
Well, you know, we're splitting hairs here. We're splitting hairs, and I like
to be honest, it's a bit more than splitting hairs, isn't it?
It's not Brunswick.
Oh, the negative campaign, I think, clearly must have had an effect. It must have had an effect, but that's not on Rashina. You know, that's not her fault. She's an outstanding candidate.
She can do whatever she likes, but the question is it tactically a mistake to parachute someone in?
Look, it might be. It might be. And I think that was something that Labor saw in the federal election in Sydney.
In Fowler.
Yeah.
Christina Keneally. What about having I know by-elections are tricky and they may not have been at the time, but the rank and file branch member pre-selection, is that a factor here, not having something like that?
I'm a huge defender of party democracy. The problem here was just the tight time frame. We didn't have time to do it. Of course, always should have a member plebiscite.
But coming back to Kate's point about Peter Dutton, the fact that he look, I don't know whether he appeared on any Liberal call flute at all, but you know, clearly there wasn't much signage from the Liberal side of your leader. Plenty from the Labor side, scaring the pants off voters with the images of Peter Dutton. What does that tell you?
Well, can I correct the record? Peter wasn't in hiding. He visited five times and was on Rashina's socials, on every platform. There was no hiding of Peter. And this morning, you know, he was there. And yesterday morning, he was at a football club getting the #1 ticket holder.
He was.
Yeah.
Maybe that's your issue then. Is it that voters decided that Peter Dutton was not the kind of Liberal they wanted to vote for?
Well, if they did, it's not fair, and I know politics isn't fair. It's not meant to be fair. But if that perception is there, then that's a perception that doesn't match the reality of the person that I know.
What do you have to do to change, to deal with that perception? Because, you go to fairness, well, it's not delivering you electoral results.
That is true, and I'll give Labor this credit, that they are better at running negative campaigns than we are. Much better at it, and it's very effective. They did a fantastic negative campaign in the last election, and they did a fantastic negative ads on this one too. Perhaps we need to learn how to do that, but I think we should always try and rise above it.
Just quickly, I note you haven't mentioned the state-level Liberal Party infighting over the transgender rally and so on. In your view, was that a factor here at all?
We weren't picking that up in any of the listening posts, door knocking on the booths in pre-poll yesterday or today. It just wasn't coming up.
I want to go, just to hold that thought, I want to go to our reporter, Leanne Wong. No other way of putting it, that's for sure. Thank you. Just before we lose, let our panel go, just one quick question to each of you. Keith Wolahan, another by-election, Anthony mentions that Eden Monero won some years before that, 2018. There was a by-election in Longman, a swing against the Liberals. There was a move pretty soon after against your leader at the time, Malcolm Turnbull. With this result, terrible, disastrous, whatever word you want to use here, there's no doubting this is all sorts of bad news for the Liberal Party. Should you stick with Peter Dutton?
All those decisions are for the party room to decide.
I'm asking you.
Yeah. The person I know, yes. Yes, I really do.
No doubt in your mind?
There's always, I mean, everyone has doubt, but the person that I know, that I've got to know, I didn't know him before I came to Parliament.
But do you think he can win you a general election? I
think he can. It's not. I know I'll get ridiculed on Twitter for that, but I really do. I think he's a good leader, and I saw good and bad leaders in the most trying of circumstances, and he has all of the qualities of a good leader.
And Kate Thaiss, we've obviously focused a fair bit on the impact this has on the Liberal. Thank you very much. And Keith Wolahan, I know these nights are never easy for the person in the losing chair, but we appreciate you being so open and honest with us tonight.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Keith.
Thank you for having me.